Good afternoon, everybody. It's Thursday, September 18th, 2025. Welcome to Tom LoBianco Reports. Today on the show, we are talking about the ongoing war against free speech by the White House. Later, I'll be joined by Terr. He is the Director of Public Advocacy at FIRE. It's the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. They've been doing some excellent work fighting back against these big government efforts to censor speech. Of course, the newest effort breaking last night and continuing into today's ABC News's Bob Iger, Disney's decision to suspend late night comedian Jimmy Kimmel over comments he made about Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump. We'll be getting to that in a little bit. Before I get to the news today, I just want to open by talking about why I do this. Why am I not working at ABC? Why am I not trying to work at one of the places where many great journalism outfits where I used to work? I should note that ABC, all the places which are being targeted by the President of the United States for censorship right now are filled with amazing journalists. It is the key reason we know any of this. And many of them, my former colleagues, friends, people who I trust, people who I rely on to get you the news. So why am I not in there? Because if you say something, you could get canceled by the White House in this environment. That is just where we are. It's why I'm independent right now. If you're not already supporting 24-Site News, please make sure that you do. It's 24site.news, 24sight.news. I want to talk a little bit about things that we can do. Previously I've had on, if you guys watched yesterday, I'm sure you saw Reed Galen, a good friend and a very thoughtful leader on these things. We did a series of podcasts a few months ago with Trygve Olsen. Now, Trygve is Trygve. Trygve is also co-founder of the Lincoln Project, did a lot of democracy work overseas in Eastern Europe. Right? Trygve worked with people fighting against these neo-autocrats. And he wrote up 7 rules. How do you deal with this? Right? This is not new. How do you deal with people that want to get you fired for what you say? How do you deal with people who either are autocrats and dictators or are trying to become that, are behaving as such? All right. How do you handle that? Here's number 1. He wrote these last year. They continue to be incredibly important. Rule number 1, play the game that you were in, not the one that you wish you were in. I think increasingly it's becoming clear to all of us here that we know what's happening, what Trump is trying to do here in the United States. So I think it's becoming increasingly clear what he is trying to do. So we understand the game. That's very good. That's very important. You have to start from there. Rule number 2, this is Jimmy Kimmel. This is all of us. This is what I do here every day at 24-Site News. Rule number 2, always speak truth to power. I remember we had Trygve on the podcast a couple months ago, and he made the point, you never know which little truth is going to be the one that finally breaks the dam. Each little truth is important. All right. They build to the big truth. All right. This topples eventually the big lie and the big lies that we are facing right now. Rule number 3, got to be careful. Don't hand the autocrats the hammer to beat you with. All right. Remember that this battle is not about policy or ideology, Trygve writes. They will use what you say to divide you from your allies. Rule number 4, this is really important. This is some George Orwell stuff right here. Okay. Rule number 4, authoritarians must live in a truth-free present. So what does that mean? A couple things. Number 1, it means constantly flooding the zone with lies in order to create confusion. It also means not talking about the past, the the true history, the accurate history, or the future. Why is that interesting? Because the past is a time when the dictator, authoritarian, wannabe authoritarian did not have power. And the future is a time when they don't either. All right, so this is very important for reminding people of where we are. Rule number 5, use their tactics against them. Trigby calls this using zero-sum judo. All right, use big truths, marginalization, make them dependent, mock their disinformation, divide and conquer their power structure. Rule number 6, stand with anybody who will stand with you in this. And Trigby calls this the Stalin rule out of World War II. I mean, there was a time where we stood with Soviet Russia because we had a bigger enemy, Hitler and the Nazis. Okay, so whatever you might think of folks who you might have had some differences in the past before, right, now's the time to stand together. And then the other thing here is rule number 7, the final one, attack their vertical power structure. This is pretty interesting. This is some pretty high-level political strategy and thought. Go after the weak points, okay? Go after the weak points of where they are exposed, all right? Authoritarian regimes, wannabe authoritarian regimes are actually surprisingly brittle. All right. We're going to be getting to Aaron Terr here in a little bit. Let's check my email, make sure we haven't missed anything. Okay. Before we get to Aaron Terr, and I want to make sure, guys, if you got the newsletter this morning, please make sure that after you're done signing up for 24/7 News, head on over to Fire. They just started on Substack recently. They've been doing very good work. Sign up for their newsletter, Expressions. Aaron writes for them, has a very good piece we'll be talking about later. Let's hit the news real quick. All right, Jimmy Kimmel, top of the news. All right, here's Rolling Stone has a very good write-up on this. I'd also recommend Oliver Darcy at Status News, former longtime CNN media reporter, now, like me, out here in the independent space where we cannot be canceled. Thank God. This is Rolling Stone suing Substack, a number of other folks here. Jimmy Kimmel pulled indefinitely by ABC over Charlie Kirk comments. All right, here's what Andrew Alford, the president of Nexstar Broadcasting, which is the one that owns the ABC affiliates, as they're trying to do a mega merger, monopolizing really these local TV stations with Tegna, the $6 billion mega media monopoly merger. All right. We'll get to the antitrust stuff here in another show. Says, quote, continuing to give Mr. Kimmel a broadcast platform in communities we serve is simply not in the public interest at the current time. We made the difficult decision to preempt this show to let cooler heads prevail. Okay. Here's how Trump's federal communications czar, Brandon Carr, who used to be a free speech advocate, is no longer a free speech advocate, put it this way. Quote, I think it's really sort of past time, and a lot of these licensed broadcasters push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we are going to preempt, we are not going to run Kimmel anymore until you straighten this out, because we licensed broadcaster are running the possibility of fines or license revocation from the FCC if we continue to run content that ends up being a pattern of news distortion. Again, this is Brendan Carr, Trump's communications czar, saying this. And then he inserts the threat, quote, we can do this the easy way or we can do it the hard way. This is the theme of the Trump presidency, which we've talked about before on here. Other news, big news. If you're a parent, even if you're not a parent, probably good to get updated on your vaccines. Yesterday on the Hill, over in the Senate, former CDC Director Susan Menarez testified, along with Dr. Corey, who also quit the CDC in protest of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary, pushing anti-vaccine, I'll say it, crap. That's not what the New York Times wrote. They don't write those words. I'll say it. Pushing junk science out there, and raising concerns now that we could have a rise in infectious pandemics. Of course, the CDC itself does not mandate vaccines or not vaccines, can't ban vaccines either, but it is a very important scientific advisory group, which, in addition to protecting us against as much as possible against infectious diseases, playing a very critical role, also studies the way that vaccines are administered, what are good vaccines. All right. And Menarez was pressured to put out an anti-vaccine recommendation by Kennedy Jr. before she was fired by him. Now, this is pretty interesting. One of the very interesting senators over there is a Republican, Bill Cassidy, who himself is a physician and, has been off again, on again with Trump. Louisiana Republican. He noted that Mr. Kennedy has long condemned the recommended slate of childhood vaccines. In particular, this is the New York Times. He has called into question the hepatitis B shot that newborns receive. Several senators raised questions about the recommendation during the hearing. Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican of Indiana, chairman of the Health Committee, and himself a liver specialist, closed the hearing by speaking passionately about how the rates of disease fell in the decade after CDC recommended the hepatitis B shot for newborns. Quote, "That is an accomplishment to make America healthy again," he said. After the hearing, Mr. Cassidy told reporters Americans should not have confidence in the changes to the childhood vaccine schedule that come from the Kennedy Jr. CDC Vaccine Advisory Committee. Consult your doctors, folks. All right. We're in some weird times right now. Of course, we're going to be going deeper here in a second. Let's bring on, I guess, joining me now, before I bring him on, I want to mention, please sign up, 24 Site News. We do this every day. You get Tom LoBianco Reports, get the email. All right, make sure we find out what we're talking about, what we're digging into. Turns out we're all free speech warriors now, as the White House comes after anybody that says stuff that they don't like. So it's a lot to deal with. I'm not going to lie. It's heavy. But we stay in this for a reason. Make sure to catch us at 8 p.m. on the replay on Political Voices Network over on YouTube. Now, I'm very excited to have Aaron Terr from FIRE. Let's bring on Aaron. Hey, Aaron, how are you, man?
Hey, Tom. I'm a little busy, but I'm trying to hold it together. I can say there's no doubt that I've been working at FIRE for about 4.5 years now, and this is the busiest week I've ever had. It's just we don't have time to address one incident or thing that comes or something that the administration said before like 5 new things pop up.
Yeah. Dude, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what the entire FIRE team is doing. It's honored, man. Really, you guys were free speech champions, before it was cool. Free speech, First Amendment defenders. Now that it is cool, and onward through thick and thin.
Yeah, I hope it's still cool.
I think so. I fucking love it. Well, tell us a little bit about what FIRE does, real quick, and your job over there.
Sure. So FIRE is a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to defending free speech and free thought for all Americans. We take the nonpartisan part very seriously. So we don't care what your political views are, if you're a Democrat, Republican, communist, fascist, libertarian, or anything in between. If your speech is protected, we'll defend your right to say it. And we also protect free speech as a cultural value. So not just as a legal restraint on the government, but we try to promote it as an important value that underlies our democracy and is important to our way of life. And we want to ensure that as many Americans as possible believe in it. If only because if we lose faith in it as a cultural value, then it
Mm.
probably won't be long before people start to question whether we should remove legal protections for it as well.
Yeah. Here, let's. So before we dive in on Kimmel, I'll read the latest from Fire statement here issued today. And again, go check out Fire. It's the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Find them on Substack. Find them on X, all good social media platforms. You name it. Here is Fire's official statement today. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr is once again abusing his position, trying to assert government control over public discourse, spuriously invoking the, quote, public interest standard to selectively target speech that the government dislikes. President Trump has recently called for the FCC to revoke ABC's broadcast license because he does not like the way the network and Jimmy Kimmel in particular speaks about him. Just yesterday, Trump suggested to a reporter that Attorney General Pam Bondi's statement about prosecuting, quote, hate speech might mean she will go after ABC, quote, because you treat me so unfairly, it's hate. Now Carr's threatening ABC for comments about Charlie Kirk's shooter that Kimmel made during his opening monologue on Monday, insinuating that the shooter was, quote, part of the MAGA gang. The FCC has no authority to control what a late-night TV host can say, and the First Amendment protects Americans' rights to speculate on current events, even if those speculations later turn out to be incorrect. Subjecting broadcasters to regulatory liability when anyone on their network gets something wrong would turn the FCC into an arbiter of truth and cast an intolerable chill over the airwaves. Amen. Amen.
And by the way,
yeah.
everything you just said is something that the current FCC chair, Brendan Carr, used to believe. If you go digging up things that he said for the few years before he was appointed chairman, but apparently he's had a major change of heart.
Yeah, there's hypocrisy and then there's hypocrisy, which is what we seem to have right here. What do you make of this? Because it's not the first time the administration has attacked their perceived opponents. Using the full weight of the government to come after folks.
Well, exactly. This isn't, in some ways, what's happening right now isn't new or unprecedented for this administration, because there has been already a fairly systematic and aggressive use of government power to target people who disagree with the administration's policies or in some way oppose its agenda, or media that provide what they deem to be unflattering coverage of the president. Right? And the FCC in particular has already been going after various media outlets based on these flimsy rationales that completely disregard the First Amendment limits on the FCC's authority to police the content aired by broadcasters. Now, I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding that this vague public interest standard or these other very narrow policies that are, by the way, are constitutionally suspect, but even assuming that they are constitutional, they're very narrow exceptions that absolutely do not apply to a late night host making some brief comment about MAGA or what he thinks are the motivations of the Charlie Kirk shooter, which, by the way, we can get into it, but I think people have even been misinterpreting what Jimmy Kimmel said, but that's beside the point, because as we said in our statement, the government doesn't have this general power to police the truthfulness of political discourse. The First Amendment is based on the idea that when someone says something wrong that you think is wrong or false or wrongheaded or offensive, you respond to it with your own voice. You respond to it with more speech. You condemn it. You criticize it. You correct it. And all that was happening in response to Kimmel. There was no shortage of voices coming out and condemning him for what he said. That's the way it's supposed to work in a free society.
Yeah. This is foundational to who we are as Americans. It is the First Amendment. It's the reason that we have this. Thomas Jefferson noted the importance of the ability to speak freely, to have an educated citizenry, so that you do not have tyranny. It's exactly what we broke away from successfully, bloodily, 250 years ago. It's remarkable to see this. I'm going to read something here. So yesterday night, getting ready for the show here, I was reading up on Edward R. Murrow, legendary, and McCarthyism. And you know what's funny about this is because there are so many people who compare this to McCarthyism, and it certainly has that flavor, right?
Absolutely.
So, but it's amazing to me because of how much more extreme this is, because it's the White House and the executive branch doing it, mustering the weight, doing this right now, as opposed to one Senate chairman. But I have to tell you, I was reading some of the, here's a poster, a flyer that was handed out by McCarthy decades ago. Here we go. Americans, don't patronize Reds. You can drive the Reds out of television, radio, and Hollywood. This tract will tell you how. Why we must drive them out. The Reds have made our screen, radio, and TV Moscow's most effective fifth column in America. The Reds of Hollywood and Broadway have always been the chief financial support of communist propaganda in America. Our own films made by Red producers, writers, and stars are being used by Moscow in Asia, Africa, and the Balkans. Right now, I was really shocked by this. Right now, films are being made to craftily glorify Marxism, UNESCO, and one worldism via your TV set. And they are poisoning the minds of your children under your very eyes. This is remarkable. Look at this. Using your TV set and are helping Moscow and the internationalist. This is the language that we hear today.
I mean, and now you can compare that to some of the rhetoric that we've heard from administration officials today and earlier this week. I mean, I was just reading before I got on with you an op-ed by the Secretary of Agriculture, which I don't know why they're writing op-eds about this rather than just like dealing with farm subsidies and stuff. But they towards the end of the op-ed, they say, now is the time to wage war, not through aimless violence, but with a legal and rational crackdown on the forces that are desperately trying to annihilate our nation. And then we have the vice president saying that the administration will use every legal avenue at our disposal to find and punish all those responsible for this wave of political violence. White House advisor Stephen Miller promising that we will uproot and permanently dismantle the vast domestic terrorist networks that incite violence against everyday Americans. These agents of chaos must be exorcised from our nation without apology and without compromise. So yeah, it is starting to sound like what's old is new again. And the thing is, like, they'll try to defend it by saying, no, we're just talking about the people that are. It's just the Mott and Bailey thing, right? Where you come out with this very loose, broad rhetoric that sounds like you're setting the stage for this massive crackdown on dissenting viewpoints, right? But then the administration's defenders, I just know they're going to say, well, no, they're talking about people who actually threaten violence or people who engage in violence, people who incite violence. But I think the important thing to understand here is that those incitement and true threats, there are these very narrow exceptions to the First Amendment for, like, I can't directly threaten to kill you right now if I'm not saying it as a joke, but I really mean it.
Yeah.
And you can't incite violence, but incitement is a narrow legal standard that means speech that's intended to and likely to provoke immediate unlawful violence. So we're talking about like a torch-bearing mob standing outside someone's house and the leader says, burn it down, right? That would be incitement. But what they're trying to do is expand it, right, to anyone who says anything that basically could result in some undefined point in the future, somebody somewhere committing a violent act. And that just sets the stage, right, for suppressing a whole range of speech on controversial political issues, right? You can argue, and going both ways. I mean, you could easily argue, right, that people protesting police brutality is going to result in somebody killing a police officer. And that is something that's happened. You can argue that like really passionate anti-abortion advocacy, calling abortion murder, is going to result in somebody murdering an abortion provider. That's also something that has happened. You know, there are disturbed individuals in our society who are going to commit violent acts, and it sometimes might be inspired by, or at least kind of latch on to some political issue in the zeitgeist as a justification, although usually they have some kind of mental illness on top of that. And we can't let that dictate the the acceptable limits of political discourse, or else there will be nothing left to say.
Right, right. And folks, you can find the link in the newsletter this morning. Here's the latest from Aaron, which he goes into this dissecting. Not just an advocacy group, but FIRE is stacked with lawyers who understand this stuff. Okay, Aaron, your legal background here is just incredibly helpful as we navigate this. A reminder that beyond veiled threats of a White House, there's law here. There's constitutional bedrock that we're dealing with. Now, you talk about this. I want to point out, of course, as you alluded to earlier, that FIRE, has been active for many years supporting anybody who is being censored wrongly here. You guys grew out of support on college campuses. Really, if take away the incendiary comments that Charlie Kirk built, right? Put those to the side, and we could deal with those comments at another time. But one of the things, a lot of overlap in what you guys were doing. At the same time Charlie Kirk was there, you guys are on campuses supporting open debate, supporting free speech, supporting why we are here. I want to ask you, what do you see the FCC's role in regulating these social media companies about this, and the impact on Americans' opinions, and how we could have, whether that's useful in having an improved national conversation here? Because this is, especially in the digital space, what is free and open speech versus what is insightful. Has been a raging debate for years now.
Yeah, well, one thing I'll say real quick is that the FCC has no authority to regulate social media. They only have authority over over-the-air broadcasters. Now, please don't put that idea out into the universe, because I don't want Brendan Carr to start thinking that he can now start investigating Twitter for things that people say on there. But of course there are calls by many other government officials at both the state and federal level to regulate social media. But the First Amendment applies to social media the way it does to speech in any other medium. The same First Amendment exceptions apply. No, you can't threaten violence. You can't directly incite immediate violence. But you can express opinions that other people find hateful or offensive. And again, this is an extremely important principle because we just don't want the government to have the power to decide what speech is too hateful or offensive to be uttered, because we just know where that leads. That kind of power is inherently subjective, and once granted, it is inevitably used to protect allies of whatever party is currently in power, and to punish critics and dissenters. And that's true whether you have Democrats or Republicans in power. And I think what a lot of people are forgetting right now is that power shifts. And so the way that they are just ratcheting up the censorship and setting new precedents for government crackdowns on speech, you're leaving a loaded gun on the table that can be picked up by the next administration to use against the other side. And look, and I often hear a lot of pushback about how, well, that's actually what's happening now. Like the left was doing it for many years, and the right's responding in kind. And look, we have called out the left for many years for trying to promote restrictions on hate speech and regulating misinformation. And FIRE will consistently oppose the Biden administration's efforts to pressure social media companies to censor that type of speech. But I learned when I was young that two wrongs don't make a right. And so the answer to that is not to ratchet it up and keep engaging. I saw someone online say, I get that the left engage in censorship, but I'd rather not engage in this tit for tat until we just end up in a banana republic. And that's exactly right. It now is more important than ever for there to be a greater consensus that we restore the fundamental values that make this country great and free, including foremost freedom of expression. It's in everybody's interest. And so you need to protect that speech, that type of freedom, not just for yourself, but for those on the other side of the aisle.
Researching everything earlier, I was reading. There have been so many examples of the MAGA online mob going after folks, getting folks fired. From all the way at the top, Matthew Dowd, Karen Attiah at the Washington Post, for making accurate and protected statements. All right. But also now going after teachers. Here's one out of this is Oskaloosa teacher fired after post in wake of Charlie Kirk's death. And this the station here, KCCI, was interviewing some of the parents out there. And I was really shocked by this. They talked with someone of Mr. Almond here who says, and this is the exact same comment that got Matthew Dowd fired, said, quote, freedom of speech does not excuse you from freedom of consequence. Now, this is the rationale used by one of the parents trying to get this, who successfully got a teacher fired for protected statements. It's just really, I see people, referring to Gandhi. Well, Gandhi is the one who said an eye for the eye leaves the world blind. All right. That's where we are. All right. So, Aaron, I want to ask you, folks, just a reminder that we do questions at the end of the show here. If you're watching us live on Substack, you can drop them in the chat. Ian Walters, our producer, is with us, and he'll get those over to us. If you're catching us on the replay at 8 p.m. on YouTube, I live in the comments. Okay, so I legit do this. All right, Aaron, me, all of us who are in the trenches, we're kind of used to this at this point. All right, when we live in the sludge. Okay, all right, maybe I'll grow like a third arm or like some superpower like the Toxic Avenger or something. But I do live in the comments. I shit you not. All right, here is here's we got a question, Aaron. Mm-hmm. Are people left or right? Who are the people who are contacting employers to get people fired? Is this, quote, doxing?
Well, doxing is one of those terms, kind of like hate speech, that's really kind of vague. People use it in a lot of different ways. I think the way it originated was if someone was in like a online forum anonymously, and somebody revealed their identity, their name, maybe their contact information, their address, is putting someone's employer on blast or like on a public platform, doxing. I mean, if that's already public information, I feel like it's hard to call something doxing if it's already public information. If they are commenting anonymously and you expose their identity, yeah, I think that's a form of doxing. It's not necessarily illegal, but I do think there is an argument that, especially when it comes to, we're talking about the private sector and private employers, they of course aren't bound by the First Amendment, and they do have a right to fire employees for things that they say on or off the clock. But it still raises the question of whether, if we want to have a robust culture of free speech, if we want to live in this environment where people are so quick to put pressure on businesses to fire people for so-called wrongthink, or with digital mobs going around with pitchforks trying to destroy the livelihoods of anyone that they disagree with. I think that's a really unhealthy dynamic, and it tends to spiral out of control quickly. And I think you see that here with where it may have started with people kind of openly celebrating Charlie Kirk's death or condoning the violence against him, which I think most of us would agree is awful. I mean, that is awful speech. They have the right to say it. And there may be some businesses that say, look, that's so misaligned with our values that we're going to part ways. But it quickly expanded, right, to people who were just criticizing Charlie Kirk's views or his influence on American policies, or kind of pushing back on all the praise he was getting from the right in the wake of his death, and saying, no, we're turning this guy into a saint, and I disagree with this. And again, whatever you think about that, I mean, that's just commentary on a public figure. That should be something that's well within the Overton window in this country, to criticize someone even after their death. If you're a public figure, you're open to criticism. And look, I don't want to. I kind of don't like the way that people will say, oh, a person who's dead would have thought this or that. But I think Charlie Kirk said enough about free speech himself that he would have not supported people being fired for disagreeing with his views. His whole shtick was going on college campuses and debating people and challenge and inviting them to challenge his positions on things.
Do this is something that I've wondered about with sources recently, and it's something I was thinking about coming into the show today. Does this compare at all to some of the efforts against disinformation of 4 and 5 years ago? After the pandemic, after January 6th, how does this compare to previous efforts, either by the Biden White House
Right.
or by these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually been fascinating to watch how censorship rationales once wielded by the left are now being exploited by the right, which which offers a lesson in not trying to wield these justifications in the first place. It's back to my point earlier about how eventually, because if you do, once you put it on the table, right, the other side is likely to use them at the first opportunity, and that is what's happening. Although but that's not to excuse that the right is now using these tactics, because I think they've also escalated in a way that is extremely, extremely disturbing. But yeah, I mean, you had the Attorney General going there talking about going after hate speech, which used to be something that conservatives mocked when it was brought up by the left, and pointed out the flaws in regulating hate speech, and rightly so, something that FIRE has done for years as well. And the misinformation, I think, when you look at go back to what the FCC is doing, what is pressuring a network to drop a commentator or a late night host because he supposedly lied on air, other than an attempt to regulate misinformation? They may not use the word, but what they're doing is trying to police the truthfulness of public discourse, right? And when you look at Kimmel's comment, when he said, what did he say? He said, I think he said, MAGA spent all weekend trying to characterize the killer as anything but one of their own.
Yeah, right.
And by the way, when he said this on Monday, it was before those text messages came out that shed more light on the killer's motivations.
Right.
But I think so. Like, a lot of people are just saying, like, oh, he lied. He said that the killer was MAGA. But I think another reasonable interpretation of what he said is that people on the right were trying to paint him as someone on the left, the killer as someone on the left, and correctly so, it turns out. But so my point here is just that this is the problem with the government regulating misinformation. Is often it's very debatable whether something is a lie or not, or deceiving, or what somebody said. But now we're going to give the power to whichever ruling party, is currently in power, to decide what's true and what's false. And you don't think that they're going to enforce that in a way that just advances their own political agenda and is inseparable from their own political biases? Come on.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, what would happen if you had an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, very hypothetically, in the White House, telling Fox that, okay, well, now Brian Kilmeade must go, all right, because of his comments on homeless. All right. All right. It's a great question.
Yeah. And maybe she also decides that when people on the right call people on the left demons or communists, that want to, or that they want to, indoctrinate your children and all this stuff, maybe she'll decide that that's inspiring violence against people on the left, and we need to crack down on that type of speech, and maybe even prosecute people for it. I mean, I wish people would just try to take the long view here.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, me too. God damn.
Yeah, I agree.
I just, Aaron, we're aside from just trying to keep your head above water, what are you working on anything? Do you have time to work on anything else this week?
No, absolutely not. We are reviewing an absolute influx of submissions from people who have been punished in some way for their speech about Charlie Kirk or this awful tragedy. And we are we're sorting through that, and stay tuned. Like, you'll definitely see some advocacy from us on that front soon. But other than that, I mean, it's all just been, I've been talking to people like you in the media, and we're just trying to get our message out there. And I hope that we have the credentials, our credentials as a nonpartisan organization, our track record of defending speakers on both the left and the right, opposing censorship from both the left and the right, gives us the credibility to speak on this as from a nonpartisan perspective. And I've already had sometimes engaging on Twitter is a good thing, because I've had people come at me and just assume that I must be a leftist and that I didn't oppose this kind of stuff when it was happening during the Biden administration. And I just would here's a few links of times that I did. And some of them have come back and said, you know what, I'm sorry, I was wrong. So you can actually that's the beauty of free speech, Tom. Sometimes it does actually change people's minds.
Oh, what's up? A sliver of hope in all this. I like that, man. Hell yeah. That's incredible. Okay, Aaron, where do we find your work? What's the best way to stay up with you and what FIRE's working on?
Sure. People can visit thefire.org, our website, to see what we're working on and our latest commentary on all this stuff. You can follow us on all the major social media channels. And if anyone out there, feels that their rights are under threat, that they're facing a possible violation of their First Amendment rights, then go to our website. We have a submission form. Get in touch with us, and we'll quickly review it and see if we can help you out.
Amen. Aaron, dude, thank you. Thank you for all that FIRE is doing right now. Thanks for staying in the trenches, brother. Appreciate this.
Yeah, well, thank you for helping bring attention to it, and I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me on.
Totally. All right, man. All right, guys, real quick, before we wrap up the show today, tomorrow we're going to be talking with, still lining up, but hope to be talking with Elise Labott, former longtime foreign affairs correspondent for CNN, expert in all things diplomatic. I want to talk about, real quick, our first advertiser, projectmanagemymove.com. That's my friend Manoj. Runs this. So I'll read you the official stuff, and I'll just tell you what it is, because I helped him work on it. My buddy Manoj runs projectmanagemymove.com. If you're selling a house and don't have the time or energy to deal with cleanouts, contractors, or staging, he takes care of everything so you can avoid the stress and sell for top dollar. Go to projectmanagemymove.com and give him a call today. And I'll just tell you that I didn't know about this before. What is a distressed sale? A distressed sale is, unfortunately, if there's a death, a divorce, what have you, and folks need to move very fast. Oftentimes the home won't be in tip-top shape. There's just a lot going on, understandably. All right. You got a lot going on in your life. All right. So you put it on the market. You might not be getting everything that you could be getting for it. So what Manoj does is he works with the contractors to not just pretty up the place, as we would say in Baltimore, but to improve the value to where the house is really worth. And we're talking, maybe tens, 20, 30,000, 40,000, maybe even up to $100,000 more in home value that he gets for you by working with these contractors to come and do some pretty basic things. So it's pretty cool. I'd never heard of this before. So projectmanagemymove.com, and a big thanks. And folks, if you'd like to support independent journalism, we do this here at 24 Site News, not controlled by Nexstar or any other billionaire, not Jeff Bezos, not Larry Ellison, not anybody who's trying to put a clamp down on free speech, but we do need support to do that. So big thanks to Manoj, Project Manage My Move. Get in touch. You can reply to the email if you'd like to support independent journalism. And big thanks for being here, guys. All right. We're in some tough times for sure, but we're doing this together. We're plowing ahead. All right. I want to thank Ian Walters, producer, our friends over at Political Voices Network. If you missed this earlier today, please make sure to catch the replay at 8 p.m. on Political Voices Network. I'll be there in the comments. Really. I will hang out. Okay. You can drop your thoughts in there. Thanks for being here, folks.